Happy Monday, everybody. James Hancock here. Wanted to give y'all a heads up about a new show on HBO that I think has enormous potential. And it's a show called Succession. It's created by Jesse Armstrong. I'm totally unfamiliar with Jesse Armstrong's work. However, the producers are Will Ferrell and Adam McKay. And Adam McKay actually stepped in to direct the first episode, which is called Celebration. When I think of Will Ferrell and Adam McKay, the first thing that comes to my mind is Anchorman. And upon first glance, these two guys might seem like a strange fit for producing a show about the world's fifth largest media conglomerate in this massive family battle that takes place when Logan Roy, played by the great Brian Cox, who's now 80 years old, is thinking about stepping down, and the big debate is who's going to fill his shoes. But I think it's clear at this point in his career, Adam McKay is ready to take on different material. Because if you remember, Adam McKay a couple years ago did a movie adaptation of Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short. So something tells me that the days of Adam McKay directing stuff like Step Brothers, those days are probably in the rearview mirror. Or maybe he's just made so much money as a filmmaker at this point, he's more interested in things like business and politics. But I don't want to overemphasize Adam McKay's involvement because this is Jesse Armstrong's show. And luckily, there are 6 more episodes to look forward to before this season draws to a close. But I was immediately hooked on the concept of the show when I first saw the trailers a couple months back. It feels more like a battle for succession to the throne of a great empire as opposed to an internal struggle within a corporation. Because Logan Roy and his 4 children, they have more money than they know what to do with. They could basically live their lives however they choose, but what they all seem to crave and what they all seem to really enjoy is power and success and influence. Their company, Waystar Royco, on the surface they're a news organization, but they also dabble in movies. They have their own studio. It seems like anything that's news, media, or entertainment related, they at least have their fingers in all of those pies. But right from the first scene of the first episode, we know something's wrong because we see Logan wake up in the middle of the night and he seems lost and befuddled and confused. He's stumbling around in the dark in his home. And when his new wife, Marcia, turns on the lights, we see that Logan's just peeing on the floor in a state of total confusion. But from her reaction, we can tell this is something that has happened many times before. So while to the outside world, Logan Roy might be one of the most powerful men on the planet, behind the scenes, he's definitely starting to fall apart. And at the beginning of the story, Kendall Roy, played by Jeremy Strong, he seems like he's going to be Logan's heir apparent. While it hasn't been announced publicly yet, everybody within their company knows that Kendall is next in line and will most likely be taking over for his father in the very near future. And Jeremy Strong is absolutely fantastic in this show. He's basically just this giant knotted up ball of stress because he's been trying unsuccessfully to make this major acquisition of this house of brands, which is basically a lot of video content. And due to the conduct of some of his lawyers and some of his tactics, this character Lawrence has gotten turned off. And at this point, it seems like no amount of money will be sufficient for him to hand over the company that he's built to Waystar. And as a result of this problem, Logan starts to have a crisis of confidence in his son. I mean, Brian Cox was absolutely born to play this role because he's a very complicated, powerful man who seems to enjoy testing and abusing and manipulating children while all at the same time trying to constantly test them to see what their loyalties might be. And he's constantly putting them in no-win situations. Logan Roy has this giant surprise birthday party coming up, and he puts his son Kendall in an awkward position. He can either alienate his father by not attending the party and trying to make sure this acquisition goes through, or he can appear like a slacker by coming to the party and letting the acquisition deal fall apart at the office. Either way, he's going to be totally screwed in his father's eyes. And we see over the course of this episode that Logan has a history of setting these traps for his children to kind of keep them on their heels at all times. And it seems like Logan's daughter Shiv, played by Sarah Snook, has figured out a way to keep the appropriate distance from her father. She no longer works for him. She's dabbling in politics down in DC. And when her boyfriend is stressing out about a gift to give to her father, she basically says, look, he doesn't care about things. He's going to be equally unimpressed no matter what you give him. But as long as it looks like it costs like $10,000 or $15,000, you'll most likely be okay. The majority of Logan's kids have actually kind of run for cover away from the company just to have their own lives outside of his shadow. Alan Ruck plays the eldest son, Connor, who seems content just to live on his farm where he can think about making sourdough bread, but he avoids confrontation and is happy just to go with the flow with whatever his siblings want. Kieran Culkin plays Roman, who's probably the most flamboyant child in the family. And while he's working at his dad's movie studio for a while, he's decided also to completely break ranks with the corporation, although he still has a seat on the board. But Roman fancies himself a very innovative thinker, and he basically just doesn't want to have a boss. But all hell breaks loose when Logan decides to do 2 things. First, he decides that when he dies, he wants his seat on the board to go to his new wife, which would essentially give her double voting power on the board, which most of Logan's kids find very threatening because they're not very close with her. But he needs the signatures of his kids to make that happen, so he starts offering them better and better bait to try to bring them around. But the other big announcement that he makes, as we've seen in the trailer, he's not going to step down after all. He might stick around for 5, perhaps 10 more years, and no matter how frustrated that might make his son Kendall, As far as Logan is concerned, this is his fucking company. He built it and he's going to do what he pleases. But the really exciting thing about this show is that while the majority of us can never relate to a family where they'll just casually hop into helicopters to fly off to a park to play a game of baseball, these people are just rolling around naked in cash. In the end, we can all relate to family strife, especially when the head of a family is starting to go into a state of decline, and the big debate is who's going to be calling the shots, who's going to be the new leader of the pack as this power vacuum emerges. And watching Roman, Shiv, and Kendall talk trash to one another while at the same time trying to figure out whether or not they should form an alliance so they can stand strong against their father, that's what's going to keep me coming back in the episodes to come. I don't know if I'm going to be reviewing this show episode by episode, but I'm definitely going to be watching episode by episode. There's something truly delightful about the amount of shit talking that goes on in this show. Kendall definitely seems to be like the punching bag right now, even if on the surface he's the most successful of the kids. Just little things like his ex-wife giving him shit about the fact that a couple years ago they would wake up in the morning and her kids' iPads would have like cocaine smears on the glass. His dad condescendingly refers to him having spent time in a mental hospital. He's like, "Dad, I was in rehab." But Logan's always doing everything in his power to cut Kendall off the knees. And even Roman joins in on the fun. While Kendall is trying to grow the company and trying to position it for the future, they love teasing him about the fact that he's about to spend $125 million to buy a little website. As far as Kendall is concerned, it's a house of brands with this really robust video content, because while Logan is a master of keeping costs down, he hasn't done a great job of pivoting into the 21st century. But as far as Logan is concerned, he likes fighting against conventional wisdom. And also what's great about this show is that there are no really truly good people. Everybody receives a little bit of abuse from somebody above them and gives a little abuse to somebody below them. There's this kid, Greg, who recently lost his job at one of the amusement parks that they own because he got high at work and then ended up getting beat up by a bunch of kids and throwing up through his mask. But he is the grandson of Logan's brother, and he's basically come to Logan's birthday party hat in hand to try to get his job back. And we see that Logan is more than happy to help out his great nephew on the condition that his estranged brother, with whom he no longer speaks, personally makes the request for the favor. I'm dying to see which actor has enough dynamism to play Brian Cox's brother. But as cruel as Logan can be, and as much of a bully as he can be, he also knows how to put out the proper bait to manipulate people into doing what he wants. Because he really wants Shiv and Roman to sign this proposal that he's made about giving double voting power to his new wife, he basically offers them their dream jobs. He tells Roman that he's going to be able to run the movie studio, and he very condescendingly refers to Shiv's ambitions in politics and says, "Look, politics is what comes out of the horse's asshole. If you really want power, you want to be in front of the horse, feeding it." But much to Logan's surprise, Shiv and Roman decide it's not good enough and they're not going to sign the agreement, and the shock of their betrayal is so much that Logan ends up collapsing with what appears to be a brain aneurysm. Meanwhile, Kendall's back at the office and he's finally closing this deal with Lawrence. He's basically offered him a deal that is impossible to refuse. But we get this great twist where Lawrence, who has clearly been disgusted by Kendall's methods the entire episode, he finally gets a little bit of revenge. And he basically rubs Kendall's nose in the fact. He said, "Look, you've invited me into your company right when your father's gone into the hospital. There's a power vacuum." And he says, "I'm going to eat your company alive from within." And I just love watching this kind of corporate backstabbing and maneuvering. It's almost like Game of Thrones, but without the dragons and swords and spells. Nobody can be trusted. Everybody's ethics are in question. Most of these characters are wildly ambitious and power mad, and no one can trust their friends to have their back. Even Logan's longtime lawyer of 30 years, just on a whim, gets dismissed to light duties. So I think the best possible audience for this show is people who enjoy dark comedy with a very savage edge, particularly comedy about business. This show is not a comedy, but you will find yourself laughing frequently at some of the exchanges. We had this great scene early on where Kendall first encounters trouble with this acquisition, and some of the people working for him say, "Do you want us to call your dad?" He's like, "No." "Do you want me to call your dad?" Like, no one's calling anybody's dad. But it's absolutely hysterical because as powerful as Kendall is, he's still very much his daddy's little boy. And as soon as his staff walks away, the first call he makes is to his father trying to solve the problem. In any case, I'm totally sold on the show, but if you enjoyed Adam McKay's work on the movie The Big Short, I think you'll definitely be interested in Succession. And also, as a lot of my sci-fi shows like The Expanse and Westworld and Legion draw to a close, it's nice to have a new show getting up and running that I can follow for the next few months. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed my reaction and review. Definitely check out the show and let me know what you think in the comments below. Or if you want to reach me directly, the best place to find me is always on Twitter, @Colbrax. But if you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving my channel a subscribe. As always, I greatly appreciate the support from my channel. And I'll be back at y'all tomorrow night to review the latest episode of Legion. But as always, onwards and upwards.